This one says, Dear Helen, about a year ago, I started to wake up, and the journey has completely taken over my life. After a series of insights, I went through a 5 months long honeymoon period before spending the next half a year on emotion and shadow work, illuminating and then embracing identifications and stories one by one. For the last month, I have been experiencing more and more non-separation. Then just a few days ago, I suddenly saw that I am completely alone. I am completely alone because there is no other. This shock realization that myself and everyone I love doesn't exist, but also the birth of immense joy at my own divinity, and the understanding that I am not a small, separate self, that I am everything, and I am the divine. What is also occurring is that any remnant of separation is extremely painful. Old irritations are resurfacing, and I find myself extremely sensitive to everything. I did not expect this. Do you have any insights? So what you're describing here is very common, that the more your identity has shifted to being the only one, the one. So less and less are we believing ourselves to be a separate someone alone in the world, realizing we are alone everywhere. The only being that exists is me. Then the frequency of the body and mind as our identity shifts over. What I mean by identity is who you really know yourself to be. So not a thought process, what you have seen and seen and seen. And the frequency of the body and mind begins to shift, to become more peaceful, more quiet, more harmonious. The mind begins to quieten down. But where it is still talking, it's talking in the old way, isn't it? It's talking about people and things that don't exist outside of you, separate to you. And because you've seen so clearly who you actually are and where you are everywhere, this old way of thinking becomes incredibly unbearable. For me, it was like fingernails down a chalkboard. So the reason for that is because the overall frequency of your body and mind used to be here when you thought you were a separate being, and now it's gone right up to here for the most part. Of course, we experience fluctuations day to day. But the old way of thinking is right down here still. And there's a huge gap in the frequency of the thoughts that still pop up and the frequency of you overall. Not you, the infinite self, because you're formless, you're not vibrating. The body and mind are a vibration. And you can feel this utter discord, this huge gap. When you thought you were someone, you were here and it was fine. But these same old thoughts now are so far out of where you normally hang out. And this is a consequence of waking up to the truth. That's a good thing, though. It feels awful when it's happening, because every tiny little thing, the slightest irritation or annoyance that you used to live with on a daily basis and not even notice, suddenly becomes like, I don't like that feeling. So it has to become like this, because as you get more peaceful, more and more free, or living freer, because you're already free, and bliss and peace and all of those fun stuff start to happen, there's less and less impetus to actually continue to evolve. So it actually does you a favor that this stuff really feels icky, because it's going to drive you and to completely empty yourself out, like we were just doing, to live like that effortlessly 24/7, where mind may talk, but you don't automatically put attention on it. You can't even automatically put attention on it, on the thought just pops up, and you can't grab a hold of it with your attention and really experience that thought. The thought just pops up and you're here, and the thought goes away and you're here, and the thought comes up and you're here. So it has to be like this. because of this increasing gap. And then your thoughts becoming more and more about being this one being, and they'll come up here as you eliminate more and more what the separation thinking. So anything that you're suffering from at all now is really irritation, annoyance, things like that, even deep hurts. They're always involving two things, you and other. Me and this fear I don't want to feel. Me and this other being I'm having an argument with. Me and the money that I want or need. Me and the peace that seems to have gone. It's always two things wherever we're suffering. And there is nothing so much as two things. There are not two substances. The universe and the infinite self are synonyms. One is when it's appeared in manifestation. The other is when it's invisible and intangible, but they are the same thing. So looking at why you're suffering, it's where you're splitting yourself, in your imagination at least, because you've never actually managed to do that, where you're splitting yourself into two, and that has become so far under where you normally hang out that it just feels terrible. But that's going to push you all the way. And I'm talking from my own experience here. What it feels like is you're living this very roller coaster, and there's so much peace and silence and stillness, and then this thing pops up, and it's just immediately this very hellish world, separation experience, a lot of suffering. That's going to make sure you go all the way. You're not going to rest on your laurels, because you've seen who you are and you want that completely, totally, effortlessly, continuously, that experience. Empty, 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 peace, 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 peace. Mind can say anything from there. And you don't even divide yourself into you and thoughts. You're not even going to do that. You don't know what this thing is that's popped up in your head. You're free. Also, forget unity and forget separation. Forget duality and non-duality, those concepts. Just throw it all out completely. Truth and illusion, throw them out. The concepts, and see what happens.